Statistical Bundesamt will deliver the newest figures. With a little bit of luck, the figure will remain below the 8% of inflation. The €9 ticket might help in the Eurozone. The inflation was already above 8%. It has come back with power. The central banks are launching countermeasures, and some are talking about the return of the euro crisis. A warm welcome to you, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you might be and listening to us for our event concerning the economic and monetary union in times of crisis. We want to have a closer look at possible dangers for the European Economic and Monetary Union in this common event of the Hessen Ministry for European and Federal Affairs and the Leibniz Research Alliance Crisis in a Globalized World. And the third organizer today is also the Research Alliance Normative Orders of the Goethe University Frankfurt. I'm really happy that you've been able to join us here today. There's so many of you, that's great. And without further ado, I'll give the floor to Uwe Becker, the Hessen Secretary of State for European Affairs.
Yeah.
Well, the members of Parliament, Schuster and Mureşan, the Head of Cabinet of Executive Vice President Dombrovskis, dear Mr. Hager, dear Mrs. Professor Dr. Koetter, dear Dr. Kroll, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to wish a warm welcome in the name of Boris Rhein, Hessen Mr. President, and the Lucia Puttrich, as well, Minister for Federal and European Affairs of the State of Hessen, for this important topic. Crisis talk concerning the economic and monetary union in times of crisis, and seeing the numerous topics, this major topic of Stability and Growth Pact and reform might have been left aside. And in the panel discussion, we can see that there's still an intense discussion going on, although in a lot of areas, other questions have become more important, especially linked to the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine. I'd like to wish a warm welcome to our panel members. First of all, we're looking forward to a really interesting debate. Thank you very much also to our cooperation partners that have been mentioned already as co-organizers. The Economic and Monetary Union is the result of a continuous process of integration within Europe. This is important to say, and is one of the fundamental themes and fundamental building blocks representing the European Union and its build-up. And with adequate economic and monetary measures, economic growth and a high employment level are guaranteed in order to have a certain framework of the member states in the COVID-19 crisis. And in March 2020, the Commission has launched for the first time the Stability and Growth Pact element of the exemption clause, and the regularly foreseen indebtedness levels have been left aside. In the framework of the European semester, the European Commission has proposed that the exemption clause would also be activated in 2023. Exceptionally, the major uncertainties linked to the economic downward spiral linked to the Ukraine war. For the member states, there would be continuously a possibility with specific investment needs empowered green change and digitization and independence in the energy sector to have a possibility for additional investments. At the end of the day, for the reform debate coming up, it should not be a question to question the basic structure for the Stability Growth Pact, but to have additional investment needs as a central element, a balance between high debt and due to the corona crisis, and additionally due to the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, and important investments for more digital or more climate-friendly economic structure on the other side. Concretely, it would be about having a possibility to adapt when individual states have to reduce their debt burden, and additional measures in the climate change area or defense or digitization become needed, or in the context of the Green Deal as well, and calculate them out of the debt level. This discussion is certainly an interesting one as well. In this debate, we have to take into account as well that the European Union, with the Next Generation Europe Fund, has launched a major debt situation as well for the first time. I'm quite convinced that in the future the EU will have the potential and sufficient performance levels to master all the challenges that are coming up right now. We have to find the right path right now in order to make sure that the economic and monetary union can be stabilized on the long run. With all reflections concerning expenses, we also need a discussion about structural reforms that are needed and quite solid national households. And the budgets have to be taken up. And in the last years, this discussion has become secondary. Sustainable growth are important elements, more growth and more employment based on solid budgets. And we have a responsibility for future generations as well, and try to make sure that their potential for action is not being reduced due to that. An exchange about the foreseen reform of the Stability and Growth Pact is of the utmost importance for the population in Europe. I'm really looking forward to a discussion today. High-ranking panel members, and I'm looking forward to the results of today's discussion. And now I would like to give the floor, as foreseen, to Dr. Kroll. You have the floor. Well, thank you very much, Secretary of State, dear members of Parliament, Head of Cabinet, dear Mr. van Huizinga, dear guests here in the room and in front of your screens. I'm happy to be able to welcome you today here in the name of the Leibniz Peace Research Institute, Frankfurt, and the Leibniz Research Alliance Normative Orders as well. Thank you very much for the excellent preparation again for the event. Today's topic, Economic and Monetary Union in Times of Crisis, leads us back to the beginning of our Research Alliance in 2013. European economic and finance crisis was the trigger to launch this alliance, taking up this first crisis and others afterwards. Resilience, crisis resistance within the Union, and be prepared for shocks in the future were the topics. I had a look at the older text in the morning, and that was before the corona pandemic, before the war of aggression of Russia in Ukraine. That was just in the aftermath of the economic and financial crisis. And the crisis elements were quite strong at the time already, but new ones have been coming up, and this is still a topic that needs to be taken up in our research activity as well. As researcher in crisis situations, I'm quite interested to see how top measures are being taken in such a situation of crisis. The tension between exemption measures and reform, two topics that are coming up today as well. Exemption measures becoming the setup for a new structure, and this is quite interesting, and we've been able to find a very good panel to have a discussion about precisely these dichotomies, and are we still in an exceptional situation here? What can we learn from it, and what will be important to become a normality in the future as well, to have a crisis-safe union in the future as well. The different panel members will be introduced just afterwards. I'm really happy that we have an opportunity again for a very practical dialogue in the economic and research ends. And I'd like to give the floor to Silke Wettach from the Wirtschaftswoche magazine. I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion here today. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. You've mentioned the core business of our discussions. Are we well prepared to the crisis or crises? We've been talking about this, and this will be a topic for the keynote speech by Professor Dr. Michael Koetter as well. Dunlop is maybe still known to some of the viewers in the Euro crisis, who could see that we have a very unholy connection between banks in difficult situations because they had state bonds and states again getting into difficult situation because they had to save banks. Do we have this vicious circle broken in a sufficient level in the last years? Before the corona crisis, we did have some time to rebuild and restructure Europe after this, and that will be a topic for our keynote speaker, Vice President of the Leibniz Peace Research Institute, and at the University Magdeburg, amongst others. Before giving him the floor, I would like to indicate to all people on the screens that they can send questions or call us. You can send us an email at streamline at lv-Brüssel in German with ui.hessen.de, or you can call us at 0032 for Belgium, 472 030181. Dear Secretary of State, Mr. von Heusinger, dear members of Parliament, dear guests, dear Dr. Kroll, it's a pleasure for me to have an opportunity to give you a short keynote speech of a topic that's been close to my heart for years now in my research activity, but also as a citizen in the European Economic Union, where we are trying to ensure a stable level of wealth for as many people as possible. In this basic situation, we have to see that we are not working in the EMU in just this crisis, but there's different layers of crises coming together, actually. We have a geopolitical instability due to the war of aggression in Ukraine on the one hand, but we have rather latent conflicts, China, Taiwan, Syria, and others. The pandemic situation was difficult for more than 2 years. Children at home for homeschooling and home activities due to the pandemic have not been easy as well. So in the middle and the long run, we have the major task to change our economy as a whole in the area of sustainability. So all these are major elements, and at the end of the day, they will be major structural drivers for change. And these have had economic crisis. We have uncertainties in energy supply. We have investment blockades because we don't know how the future will be. We have pressure on the labor market because we are losing skilled workers. We have disruptions in the supply chains and other difficulties. And product prices are on the increase everywhere. And this becomes the most visible in the very strong growth in the inflation area that has been mentioned already. In the remaining 7 minutes for my keynote, I would like to have a little look in the rear view mirror to see what about the announced reform of the Stability and Growth Pact in the present situation of crises. And we have had the major financial crisis and the sovereign debt crisis right after that. Ad hoc measures were mixed up with evolutionary, structural, tentative reform endeavors. The present economic and monetary union is the child of a forgotten crisis, for some maybe, because let's remember when the music stopped on the 15th August of 2008 and Lehman went bankrupt, our financial system and our global economic order came to an end abruptly. All this was the consequence of excessive risk-taking, wrong incentives, weak governance structures in the banks, amongst the market actors and the market participants as well. All of us as investors and savers as well. So maybe wrong incentives were brought up by the financial industry to have wrongly priced risks consumed at an excessive level. This had an immense burden for households as a consequence, and so between 2008 and 2012, 800 billion of capital aids had to be adopted, and 1,600 billion as guarantees, and this went one-to-one to the state budgets, and this closes the circle of things that we want to reform in the near future, the Stability and Growth Pact. So huge burden for households with the state debt level of 40% in 2008, going to almost 80% up until 2012. Certain EU partners had a much more precarious situation. 130 Greece, 170% of sovereign debt rate in 2009 for Italy. So the markets lost their faith that this situation to carry all these debt burdens could continue. This would not have been an immediate problem if we didn't have had the doom loop. Due to wrongly priced risk ponderations and the costs going together with these sovereign debts, banks have been sucking up, in a way, the state bonds of their own country, respectively. And this led to an unholy alliance that you cannot let these banks go bankrupt without questioning the whole system. And there was no alternative here, leading to a situation that on an ad hoc level, from state means or fiscal funds, or the ESF institution and the ESM. Afterwards, we had to help countries who couldn't afford, to let their banks go bankrupt, and banks that could not allow their countries to go bankrupt either. So it's important to see here, this is really absolutely necessary in the present discussion as well. At the time already, we've had shut out a lot of our ammunition, economic policy, or purely political measures as well. There was a paradigm change in the global policy that we had known until there. Since then, we have the zero interest rate level. We had rebuying programs, extension of the safety framework. Interested people like myself did not always understand them completely. The anti-fragmentation tool being discussed by the ECB right now in order to have the PEP yields in a better distribution and lower the pressure are amongst the ad hoc measures that have to be discussed. The fact is that these measures are on the one side, but on the other side, at the end of the day, the uncertainty on the markets, the spreads that are increasing, capital costs for stressed states and banks can only be reduced by the whatever it takes speech, and the confidence in the resilience of the ECB. Trust and confidence are the main elements. We need structures that are working solidly. Citizens and market actors can believe in them again. And we will have to see in how far this credibility might be compromised by the diverse ad hoc measures that have been used in the last 10 years. And ex post, we've tried to anchor them structurally. Not only ad hoc answers, of course, there were major structural efforts as well. And I think this is a huge success story of Europe's at the time and still today, that we've been looking for answers and found them together as well. This is a distinction as compared to other societal orders in the world, comparatively. Structural answers, and particularly a new architecture for the European finance system to be created. We wanted a banking union. We wanted harmonized rules and integrated markets. The leading idea of the Reform 2012, after having developed the ESF and ESM, 8 packages for Greece, ad hoc measures leading into more understandable and correctly mandated systems, were that the doom loop had to be dissolved, allowing us to have more surveillance and authority on a European level, and governance conflicts could be taken aside. The 3 pillars of the European Banking Union are quite known, better for me even, 3 pillars on European level for the banking union. And down that we have the single supervisor mechanism as surveillance mechanism. The major banks, system-relevant banks, are brought together with joint teams, not linked to national interests. Then as a quality reviews and listen for the banking supervision, see if certain risks come up before they create, and then mocking up the frother. If it doesn't work, we want to. We have the main connection point in the stability pact, the liquidation. We have to go away from fiscal measures, saving banks, because we think we are without any alternative, and rather a bail-in regime. With the system of a pre-financed insurance system, if you like, they would cover themselves. This single resolution mechanism in the institutional terminology with the single resolution board, its organization is working with national authorities. Bail-in means owners, and that would be taken in, and 1% should become 70 million in July 2021 was 50 billion for deposits. It's 58 billion for the German side right now. Would that be enough? If push comes to shove, and right now, due to the pandemic, the supply chain problems, and all the others, state budgets are under heavy burden, and possibly markets will start again, like in 2010, to lose their confidence. And I don't see quite clearly whether, and whatever it takes, will be enough again to create sufficient confidence levels to reduce this dissonance. The fundamental layer of this system are manifold, but I would simply like to indicate that banking resolution and leading to a bail-in regime, well, in the scientific proof, it's not a silver bullet. It's not a means to solve it all. You say if all the bonuses for bankers have been reduced because the risk hunger would be restricted. Did the banks do so? Yes. Well, the fixed amounts have been increased. So the total compensation has remained the same at the end of the day, but market capital didn't flow away. But if you have more fixed, it's like an insurance. And for risk-neutral agents, this will mean that they will take more risks with Stefano Cornello and Konstantin Wagner. We have shown this in the paper. So, and this is my point. They will probably never have through legislations to be brought together quickly a situation where non-intended effects can be covered completely. So we need a regulation where ex post evaluations of all instruments are done thoroughly and understandably for the sovereigns. I would like to conclude with an institutional change that, in my view, is pretty close to the consequences of the reform of the Stability Pact, the reform of the ESM, which happened more or less under the radar. You certainly know that the ESM is the new backstop policy of the Single Resolution Fund, the institution that takes sick banks taking up state bonds, and if the SIF shouldn't have enough funds, it would be available as a facility with 1% of the covered deposits. In the first half year of 2022, this should be done, depending on the ratification in the countries of the currency area, or the monetary area. And this would lead to the situation that we could act rapidly if, for instance, we should have stronger disruptions having an impact on banking, real estate, supply chain problems, bankruptcy procedures with 1 or 2 years relation. So the whole philosophy of the doom loop would be watered down. It's not the profits taken up beforehand from the financial industry that would be the insurance, but fiscal means that would have to be made available ex post. So the problem, should we be worried about, is the sovereign debt in 56 in Europe, 116 in France. The 4 major indebted nations have about 60% of all EU debts, which is not really stable in my world, at least. Financial stability ECB report indicated that the part of the national state aids as part of the global assets of banks are increasing from 2 to 5% EU, Italy from 6 to 22. In 2022, that's a preview that this is a problem if lights go out, because Italy is strongly gas dependent. We can discuss about this as well. higher because due to inflation pressure are quite foreseeable. 1/3 of all sovereign debt in the EU area will have to be paid in the coming 3 years. We have gotten used in a low interest rate surrounding, and in Germany as well. And it's obvious that if you have to transfer this now, this will be really expensive, and it's expensive that no one thinks that they are getting back their money. We have a confidence crisis again. So I think it would not be a bad idea to talk about this next to the reform of the Growth and Stability Pact, about a possible reinforcement of the SRF. Why remain at 1% of covered deposits, maybe going up to 2%? Are there other measures that would anticipate certain unwanted truths and leave the risks where they should remain in the financial system? That's how I wanted to conclude. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much. You've indicated quite clearly what a difficult situation we're in already. The poly crisis is a term created here in Brussels, and this is really describing in an adequate way, and you've described as well what had been reached in the last years in our discussion. We would like to focus on what has to be done now, what's coming up. And for that purpose, I'd like to invite the panel members to come and join me on stage. Well, I'm really happy that we have a high-ranking panel with its members. Next to me, Michael Hager, you're the head of cabinet of the executive vice president Valdis Dombrovskis, comment in the area of financial, monetary, and European matters. Thank you for joining us today. Then Siegfried Mureşan, member of European Parliament, PPE. German is practically your mother tongue. You're a member of parliament for Romania. Well, thanks to your mother tongue, you're able to join us here without any problems. Next to you from the SPD, I'd like to welcome Joachim Schuster as Mr. Mureşan, also a member of the European Parliament and of the Commission for Economic and Financial Matters in the European Parliament. I'd like to start with Mr. Hager. Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, has announced already that in autumn she will present a paper. Critical minds say it's going to be a little paper, Papierchen. Some skeptics say that, but there will be a proposal at least how the Stability Pact will continue, because in the coming year it will still be suspended. So what will you indicate in this report? What can we expect? Well, in her program, our president had indicated already, quite initially, one of the indications would to have a look at the situation, how good the functioning of the Growth and Stability Pact with, and possibly propose measures to have some fine-tuning here and there. That was in 2020. At the very beginning, we've launched a discussion. Discussion paper has been published, and this was supposed to indicate where we have still deficits or possibly structural weaknesses in the Stability and Growth Pact, and how can we work with it in order to improve it. And that was the last paper we had published just before the corona crisis, and this debate had been put to the fridge, so to speak. We've taken it up again, and we had the consultation right now with a new paper as a basis. And what has the corona crisis delivered as new elements in this discussion that have to be taken into account and integrated in the approach? And as a matter of fact, in autumn we will deliver a paper. It's not so much the volume of the paper that matters, but rather content. Yes, but the little paper, the Papierchen, was not concerning the number of pages, actually. Well, all the better. But it will be about showing, and the debate that has been launched publicly was a contribution, and different players have been involved. This shows the divergence of opinions concerning this topic and how we will bring it together in a way allowing us to build a consensus that will open the path for a reform. It doesn't make sense to have over-ambitious ideas being presented that will leave completely on the side and have no purpose anymore. So the idea is to have these different elements brought together based on different diverging opinions in a way that we have a purposeful progress being made.
Gesagt, keine überambitionierten Ideen, kleine Stellschrauben. Ich habe genau.
You said small things. Mr. Mureşan, is this enough? Well, we think that every weakness does come with a cost, and we see in crisis times that we have this different costs and we can't correct them. That means we need something for good and for bad times, and then obviously debts have to be paid in good way, in bad times. You already talked about refinancing costs with 1%. These are things that are feasible, but with 6% we have problems, even the strongest economies in the European Union. And therefore, as European at PPE, we have advantages and disadvantages. We already have flexibility, but as European Union, we have 750,000 euro more of debts before the Corona crisis hit. And this is the most important fund, 750 billion euro, and therefore we are really cautious. We have this flexibility, we want to use it. And last point, we have to know what the consequences the war in Ukraine is bringing also for our future business model, and only afterwards we can have long-term decisions, because if we have the consequences on our economy, of the commerce, and as long we are not closing all this, we can't take any decision. Is it right? You don't want to change anything because you say if we have the flexibility and the rules that we have, it seems that you would like to keep things like as they are. We are saying that the discipline as far economics is concerned, because if we have more debts and the next crisis will be coming, we do not know which the key will be, and we will have this, and we can obviously have these points, but not with the debts, but with the rule. You need to simplify and guarantee discipline in the economics, and obviously invest there where we have growth, where we have a stronger economy. No, not at all. 10 years ago, we wanted to make investments. 5 years ago, we wanted to have something for the migration crisis. 2 years ago, we wanted to didn't want to put into the deficit what was necessary, and now we have also an opening of the box of Pandora, and we can say what we want, but the financial markets know exactly how much money we have, how the deficit is going, and this would only lead to a loss of confidence, and obviously also the Corona crisis. How do you think about it? For me, it's completely different, because we shouldn't be too ambitious. But this would mean for me, we should avoid that we need a changement of the contract, because we are not quick enough. Otherwise, I would say we really need an ambitious reform. that has to distinguish from what we have, and I do not see right in the moment that in the financial that we have financial crisis. We have a crisis of the real economy, and this is not easy to tackle. If we want to fight against the climate change, then we have to invest a lot also in the private sector, and we have geopolitical differences that lead to the fact that we have supply chains that not are working. We are talking about European sovereignty, and I wouldn't point it out with our things with China, and we already had the Germany at the second biggest enemy after China. And how is this going with Biden right now? And now the third crisis is obviously the war. And right in the moment, we do have the problem that we have the first monetary results thanks to the inflation, which can't be fought by the central bank because the supply chains that are going down bring high prices. We have high prices more or less elsewhere, and it's somebody from the left. I'm not so much against debts, but there are so many things that are financed via debts. And for me, for the Stability Pact, we do need to correct this error, because we have a common economy with a common money with national approaches. How can this work until and without breaking down? If everything is going fine, it's working, but if it's not working well, then we do need special approaches, like Mr. Draghi said, and this was telling, okay, we are doing it because we want to do it, and we will not get such an opportunity once again, but we can see how we can go forward in the economic and financial policy in order to do this with a common sense. I don't know what you mean about the emergency measures, and how about the changes? Well, we had a Corona fund, resilience or recovery fund called, and this is not against the contract because it's not ruled if the European Union can invest with debts. This is possible. We can imagine to continue like this, and we have obviously other things. What is the rule of the 20%? Then we have also less problems with the 60% of debts, which is foreseen, and it's not foreseen that there will then we will have adaptation, and then we will have different opportunities. But please, I'm wondering, you would like to have new debts? If we have debts for the right things, it's not a problem. And I criticized it with other debts that should be financed by taxes. And obviously, we are talking also about the military part, because this is not a value that you have. You are even destroying values, and therefore this should be done via the taxes. The economist says this is a huge challenge, and very often it's not said that this is really difficult. As an economist, I have to say that we should really be religious, keeping on numbers, and see our panacea in rules. I guess we do need a differentiated view. We do need clear approaches, not moral hazards, but we need also to have some positive things, and yeah, and we don't have debts, and we are going ahead like this. This is the second point, and also we are for sure in need of investments that we have to change our society, and I didn't see a lot that the state or anybody else told us exactly where we should invest. If I see who is working well, but I guess nobody in the politics is doing this well, and therefore we need markets and market mechanisms, and therefore the ad hoc measures into a working institution at the end. And this is connecting with what you've said, because I can say we have a differentiated view for we do not need dots. This should be financed by taxes, and we should also think, what can we do, create as a state, and we have also to see if we need religious numbers or if we can give some other inputs. I think that at the end of the day, you will not have the Draghi moment anymore. This is not something we have still at our disposal. And the difference we have, we need unity from our citizens, and there we have to say, and probably will also lose one or the other opinion. It's easily said, I know, but it will not working without this collateral damages. And as an economist, we need an integrated fiscal union if you want to have an economic approach, and if you have a normative value system, and where everybody is agreeing. And there we have to quarrel. We don't have to discuss all this. Mr. Hager, what will you do in order to bring the different positions all together? We can here see what we see in this public debate. And this is not the extreme positions here. Clearly, we have this stability pact is existing. It's about stability. And we can't solve all the problems of the world. Obviously, we should see what is it for and what should it be needed for in the future. And the second point is, how can we manage all the points that developed from this crisis? This had already been mentioned, how much that we have, and how we can tackle with higher fees, and therefore I think, yes, we do need a ruling with a consensus. This might work, and the debate about changes in the contract, 60 or 3%, where we want to put it, it's not helpful. How can we, in this context, have a flexibility in order to allow investments, and at the same time we also need the sustainability of our economy? And the consensus is difficult if we have with 27 who has some super perfect professors, and to do this as a teacher, for example, our function to prepare a paper where everybody can agree, this is really something difficult. Are you optimistic that you can manage the discussion? Because we don't have the pact for next year, and therefore we don't have any pressure right now. Now, we have to say, it's not the right word, with the general escape clause. We do have the opportunity when we have a severe economic downturn of our numbers. We have the opportunity to close the eyes and to give some more oxygen to member states, and obviously with the rules still functioning, because in May we already said this will not say that we do not have excessive debts approach. It's not something where everybody can take what he wants. We have some more air and space, and we have the opportunity in the next year to give some help also with the war in Ukraine, very necessary, but that doesn't mean that everybody is doing whatever he or she wants, and we should also lead all this. In the paper, we should also say where the borders are. I guess that what people see or intend is different. And more important even that you tell the member states. Now, in the parliament, you can have the debate working in the parliament. Do you have the idea that the member states are really interested? Or do you need to push them? Everything is interconnected. The debts, the investments, I guess we are all agreeing we want to invest and we want that Europe is working. We want, obviously, to have research and make investments, and the money is not only coming from the official part. We should less bureaucratic, we should have better structures, and we should also create the possibility, this approach. So then we have also the money from the European Union. For example, 30% of our expenses should go in measures against climate change for energy efficiency, and then reduce the CO2 emissions. And we have also this fund for Corona, but we didn't decide finally on it yet. And before we discuss all this, or a second fund, we do need who will pay which money, because otherwise the investors are not okay, because under Corona, this is in part loans that are repaid, and at a really small part of loans, 50% loans or 50% other money, and up to now this has not been required because there were still good possibilities to finance themselves on the market. And we see now that we have a higher interest from the states in the infrastructure in order to have also renewables and obviously not be dependent on Russia. And what I have to say, the financing here and how to repay everything is something that we should tackle before. I'm talking to you because how unified is the coalition in Berlin? You can see it in the press because this is limited, because Mr. Lindner is pushing then 2023. We have a frame for payments. He did this also before the election, and then he did everything in order to make debts, because if you have this break, then also the companies shouldn't take this as their advantage, because we have the whole sector, and there are also particular parts of the economy, and it's not only about debts. Are we able to go to a fiscal union? We can't do this in one step because this would be something huge, but there are three things that are central. We need to do everything that the states are not only making debts, but that we finance everything about taxes. For this, we need a solid financing, and then we have also the European debts. This has to do with in order to proceed. And then the third question is, how can we do more, and how can we avoid to make a division between the member states due of the economy? And this is now the question, and this is something that we can do also as a credit. We have a common price in Europe, because otherwise this would naturally obviously also lead to the nationalist parties. So therefore it's not an anti-fragmentation instrument you are pointing to. Everything that helps as well, but I guess the opportunities of the ECB are limited, first of all, of the ECB, and many of the things are not due to monetary reasons. Everything that is helpful, because I'm thinking that the crisis is getting worse, especially if the crisis in Ukraine is going on, and who is thinking that it is about the gas right now? But somebody says, well, in autumn we close down, and then we have Germany, but not only Germany, that are very dependent on this gas for delivery. And you already said it in your first statement. Now, what are you thinking about this approaches, first of all, from the ECB, and this wish for a common approach as far as the numbers are concerned? Now, well, the first question is quite quickly, because, and Mr. Schuster is right, they do not have so many things in their hands, and now we have to say creativity is something very important here. But in the end, I'm thinking from an economic point of view, it's not classical approaches that we can solve in a sustainable way. You can lower it a little bit, but in the long term, you can't motivate this structural approach, which is productivity. And there I'm not completely of the same opinion. If we could have debts in a fiscal union, then we would have something different, because it's true that obviously we have heterogeneous approaches, and there where we have them, and this is for sure the case in Europe, for example, between Bavaria or the Ruhrgebiet. And I do have a homogeneous state or room, and there you have different kinds of politics. And we don't have this if we don't go for it. And I guess I can say I'm not agreeing where EU, where is the parameter? Where is the limit here? And there we would have a tax, oh yes, this is like this or like that. And I guess when we have a fiscal transfer, and I'm agreeing because I think you do need it, then you do need a common policy, and therefore we do need the citizens that have to intervene. And then we point to this, and I would like to add one short thing. I'm not agreeing that we should not look at the financial market, what we have seen in 2008, because this is obviously something that is then interfering with the real economy, because in the end, we think we need working places. And this is really the scenario I'm thinking about. And with all the helps we had in the last years, we have risks in the book that are not clearly defined and are not good here for for the economical part, but obviously we need here this framework we do have. We should use this in order to go ahead when things are going bad, and it might really go bad, and you have different productivity. This is not always very helpful. In the last few years, anyhow, we arrived to do different things with the different things we developed, so that we that we have stability also in the crisis. We do need a photo finish or whatever we want to call it, but the heterogeneous part, and that's not only productivity, it is solvency in the member states. It's really a huge thing, and therefore we should do this step by step. This needs some time in the debate, sometimes with really hard approaches. But one point, the Pact for Stability in the reform needs to improve things, and the different points that I'm hearing here, well, this is a challenge, and this might be very tricky, and we shouldn't be convinced that the next day we have such a kind of approach. And this is a wonderful moment. I would like to ask which year we will have the Stability Pact, and which Stability Pact then? Now, the new or the old one? One of these. And this is tricky because this is like reading the fonts of your coffee, but I think that what we are seeing here, we need a long nature to have a structural reform, and if I have to shoot, then it needs a decade. And our clause is valid until 2024, and then we need to use the pact if it has not been modified. And can you exclude, because it's only a step-by-step approach. Now, we already have the rules for this, and I can't say from today on, oh, the weather's not fine, I'm stopping with everything. This severe economic downturn has to be there. We have insecurities due to Ukraine. This is making these possible, but it shouldn't be an occasion to close your eyes. Now, what is your approach? We shouldn't have rules. It's not good in Europe, and I would like to have a better form for the Stability Pact, for a fiscal union. And I guess, and I already told what I wanted to say here, and because we have a long-term approach, we need a higher investment level, and the huge part is done in the private part, but because we have obviously infrastructures, and we can't do this, and we have to do this with the pact, and Europe is living on the rules, and we are considering the rules that we have in economy and all the part. And this was right to activate it in 2020 to make it last even longer until we have planning security and obviously the availability for for an easier approach is there, and until we have this pact, we should use it and apply it like this, and not always go to the highest level. 3% should be the highest level for crisis times and not a measure for good times, because we know that in good times we have to save money in order to have enough for the economy and to help everybody out. I'm taking a lot of things with me, and I'm happy that you, as a specialist, as far as the details are concerned, you have really difficulties, and I see also you should ignore the financial markets. This is something, well, we already did a lot, and the banks are solid. I hear this from politicians, and therefore this seems to be an interesting approach from your side, and I think you will still quarrel and discuss in the European Parliament, and we can probably have still different opinions. And I see that you have a really difficult job. I hope you will have some summer holidays, but for sure it will be an interesting autumn. I thank the experts here on the stage. I thank you for watching us, and I hope here in our discussion in Hessen, in Brussels, you have interesting insights, and I guess that this topic will, well, accompany us not only months but probably years. So nice day for all of you.